NATO is going to be very happy, says Donald Trump as he heads across the Atlantic. How should European leaders deal with his threats over Greenland? Hello, I'm Vicky Young and welcome to Politics Live. Joining me today, Labour MP Sarah Coombs, Conservative MP Joe Robertson and Faiza Shaheen of Tax Justice UK.
Diplomacy with Donald Trump? He's a T-Rex. You mate with him or he devours you. One or the other.
Is Keir Starmer's calm approach to Donald Trump the right one?
What I care about is cutting bills. And so whether it's insulation or solar panels or heat pumps or indeed batteries, that's what matters to me.
Will Ed Miliband's £15 billion warm home scheme leave householders feeling better off? Are student loans landing graduates with a death sentence? And this is the scene in Downing Street where Keir Starmer, who's not joining President Trump in Davos, is preparing to leave for Prime Minister's questions. We'll bring you all of that live at noon. And we want to hear from you. If you have any thoughts on those stories or questions for our panel, we want to hear your voice. You can get in touch using the details which you can see on screen now. And we look forward to hearing from you. Well, President Trump is about to arrive in Switzerland for that summit in Davos, with tensions rising between him and other world leaders. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, is already there. And Faisal, you've been speaking to the Chancellor this morning about all of this. What has she had to say?
Yes, Vicky, all roads lead to that Donald Trump arrival here at some point. He's delayed, unusually. Air Force One didn't quite get off the ground in time. But there's a meeting of minds, is what he will be hoping for, that people somehow understand his rhetoric that we have heard about Greenland, about threatening the European economies, including Britain, with extra tariffs. I think he comes here thinking that he can persuade the rest of the world that this is in some way a good idea. Whereas the impression you get here from the Europeans and others, including some in the business community, is that this is not just a terrible idea, but a calamitous one. The interesting thing is that some of the world leaders have been coming into line in terms of that criticism of Donald Trump. Whatever they think privately, they haven't really been willing to say that publicly. We did get some of that yesterday from the likes of Mark Carney, well known to British viewers as the former Bank of England, now Prime Minister of Canada. We got it in spades from Emmanuel Macron, the French president. Words like bullying, the new colonialism, all this sort of stuff. So my question, everyone's question about British policy is, where would we land in this world that seems to be changing in terms of being the special relationship with America, or actually recognising some of the changes that have happened with Europe? So I put some of those questions to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, who's here obviously for financial reasons, and she focused particularly on having received assurances from the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, a key Donald Trump appointee.
Well, the Prime Minister made a speech on Monday. He's spoken to President Trump. I speak regularly with my counterpart in the US. And yesterday I met with the US Commerce Secretary Lutnick, where he said in public as well as in private that he doesn't see any reason why the deal secured between the UK and the US last year shouldn't continue to stand.
And Faisal, yesterday in the White House, Donald Trump said that NATO would be happy. He seems to think there could be some compromise over Greenland. Does anyone any idea how this could be resolved?
Well, I think he might think that, but the question I raise about today's events is, when he arrives, will he realise that there are very few people that think that agree with him here in Europe? And does he just not realise that? This is the sort of place where those conversations actually have to happen, which is what makes it so important. It's almost like these sides aren't talking properly. They're talking past each other. But these are big, big stakes, big stakes for the world economy, big stakes for the world. Tons of people trying to get in for this speech tonight, big security and real questions about this new balancing act, this new world order, as Mark Carney has referred to it, with rules. Perhaps it's Donald Trump's rules, perhaps it's no rules at all. And where does Britain stand within all of that? There's a lot up for grabs. We may find some clarity through the fog from Trump's speech and the reaction to it, which is this afternoon. But you wouldn't necessarily bet on it.
Faisal, thank you very much indeed. Well, someone who has been very critical, maybe not surprising, of Donald Trump is the Democratic governor of California, Gavin Newsom. We heard a little bit from him earlier. Let's hear a little bit more.
I can't take this complicity. People rolling over. I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. I mean, handing out crowns and this is pathetic. Nobel Prizes that are being given away. I mean, it's just pathetic. And I hope people understand how pathetic they look on the world stage. I mean, at least from an American perspective, it's embarrassing. The Europeans should decide for themselves what to do. But one thing they can't do is what they've been doing. And they've been playing. This guy's playing folks for fools.
Sarah, what do you say to that? There will be some of your colleagues who would be cheering those words on, and they want a more robust approach from Keir Starmer to the president.
I think the Prime Minister's number one job is to stand up for British interests and for British security. And we have always been partners with America, and we want to continue to do that. But obviously, we don't always agree with President Trump. And I think the Prime Minister has said to the president clearly what he thinks about the Greenland situation. And we need to work with our other European partners and partners across the world to try and find a way through this.
Joe, is that enough, given what the Mark Carney's saying, for example? He says there's now a rupture in the world order.
I mean, I'd like to see the Prime Minister being strong with Donald Trump. Plainly, this isn't the way you deal with your allies. Donald Trump has shaken up the way that diplomacy is ordinarily done. It's just not the way to deal with allies. We talk about Denmark and Greenland. Their future is for the people of Denmark and Greenland, not for a country that decides it might quite like a piece of land. I back the Prime Minister. He needs to stand up for British interests. British interests is the international norm when dealing with friends and allies, and that means sticking up for Denmark and standing strong.
Faiza?
Look, I think a lot of the approach so far has been quite simply delusional. It's been out of step with where we are in reality. And I think Mark Carney's speech yesterday really highlighted that. But look, we are in that dystopia. We have woken up to 2026 in this, quite very aggressive fascist in White House, where there are resource wars happening. And we can't just pretend like we can just play nicely, try and get in with the Europeans, also try and stay close to the US. We need to take a much stronger position. I mean, looking at Mark Carney, Macron, Starmer has let them lead on various agendas, and he may feel stronger looking at what they're saying to come out in a stronger position, partly because of Greenland as well, of course. But I do think that we look pathetic. I think that's true. I think we do look pathetic.
Let's go over to the House of Commons, because Matt Chorley is there for 5 Live and for us. Matt, what are Labour MPs saying about the approach that Keir Starmer's taking? Obviously, he's going to be doing Prime Minister's questions today. He's not planning to go to Davos. Do they want to see more from him, or do they think he's getting it right?
It's a tricky one, this. And I think lots of Labour MPs have sympathy for the position the Prime Minister is in. Up until now, they've been willing to go along with it, sort of hold their nose and roll out the red carpet and the state visit and all of that, because they could point to things where they were get a deal on tariffs. Jaguar Land Rover gets mentioned in every breath when you ask them the question because of the agreement they got on cars. I do think that this week may well have changed things. I would say that the private unease amongst Labour MPs is the worst I've known on the issue of dealing with Donald Trump. What will be really interesting is to see what happens at Prime Minister's Questions Day. Will any Labour MPs join those on some of the opposition benches? Ed Davey, leader of the Lib Dems, does it most weeks in publicly criticising Donald Trump, urging Keir Starmer to do what lots of Labour MPs deep down would like and join the European leaders in the criticism. So I'll be at PMQs today. My guest today, the comedian David Baddiel, joins me in the gallery. he's been looking at cats in Westminster, amongst other things, including allowing the cat in Downing Street. Although probably the main thing that's going to be the hot topic of conversation at PMQs today is Donald Trump very much putting the cat amongst the pigeons.
Thank you very much, Matt. On air on 5 Live at 2 o'clock this afternoon, of course. I mean, Sarah, do you think that we should be considering what the Europeans are considering, which is retaliatory tariffs on America?
Ideally, we do not want to get to that. I mean, mine is a manufacturing constituency. So when we were the first country in the world to get a trade deal with Trump's America, that was really beneficial for my businesses, people in my area who work in the manufacturing industry. So I don't think we want to get to a point of retaliatory tariffs, ideally, because we don't want those tariffs on us. I think Keir Starmer has been a grown-up, you know, in the entire relations with America. I think you have to be strong. I think he is being strong. But the idea that you can just cut off relations with a country like America, I just think is not realistic. And we have to work with Canada. We have to work with Europe, which is exactly what the Prime Minister does. But I think he has been calm and grown up and sensible this past year. And I think that is a strategy that so far served us well. But we've got to keep being strong.
But I don't think you have been strong, right? It's been appeasement.
Well,
it's been appeasement on
trade
big
deal
pharma.
with America for Britain. Is that not
big
a good thing?
pharma? We stood down on, and that's going to cost our NHS billions of pounds more on drugs. If you look at what happened on tax conversations at the OECDs about multinationals, the US got a carve out. Again, we stood down and allowed the US for that to happen. So the idea that we are being strong is just not. It's just not there in the evidence, and we are. You know, we have a human rights lawyer apparently who's Prime Minister that couldn't even say that Trump had broken international law by kidnapping Maduro. I mean, so the idea that we aren't just playing nicely going along with things, it's just not true in the evidence.
I think for Prime Ministers of Britain, you have to work with loads of different parties and you have to balance all the interests of the different parts of the economy. As I say, I'm a manufacturing constituency. If we had been hit by 25% or higher tariffs, it would have been absolutely devastating.
Well, that still might happen, right? What we've seen
I know, but
with Trump
so far it hasn't. So far it hasn't. And I think that I understand, obviously, that there are loads of different areas of the economy where we've done different deals and we've had different amounts of like tax regimes, etc. But I do think as a Prime Minister, there are so many competing priorities. We've got to do deals with lots of different countries. And I think you've got to be a kind of strong, stable, consistent with your approach with other countries. And I think that is what Keir Starmer has done. And I don't think just saying, that's it, we're done with America, is a kind of thing
who's
that
saying
the British
that?
people
That's not the question, though. We shouldn't go soft on our position with Greenland because we're worried about tariffs.
We're not.
So we need
how
to
would
be
how would the
strong.
Conservative Party deal with this differently?
Well, we want to see the Prime Minister being strong. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and we want him to stick up for British interests, which he's got to do. British interests is that Greenland is a matter for the people of Greenland and Denmark. They are allies of Britain. They are allies of the US. They are NATO members. And that any threats around American tariffs on Britain in order that Trump gets his own way are unacceptable. And of course, Britain would need to do whatever it needed to do to protect itself from those tariffs. We don't want to be talking about tariff wars. That is not how allies communicate with each other. But plainly, we need to send out a strong signal. The Prime Minister needs to do so because actually, Donald Trump responds better to strength than weakness.
Well, let's have a listen to the French President, Emmanuel Macron, who was speaking in Davos yesterday, suffering with an eye complaint, which is why he's wearing the sunglasses, by the way.
We do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality.
I mean, that's pretty strong stuff, Joe. Do you think that Keir Starmer, or Kemi Badenoch even, should be going as far as that?
I mean, I wouldn't want to be prescriptive over the exact style, the exact use of words. That's President Macron. I do want to see the Prime Minister being strong. He will have his own form of words to use. But as long as the message is absolutely clear, this is not the way friends and allies deal with each other, then that's the message he needs to be sending.
I mean, Sarah, are you concerned that actually other world leaders are being stronger in their language, at least, when you look at Mark Carney, when you look at Emmanuel Macron, that actually Keir Starmer is he deliberately playing it differently?
I think Keir Starmer has been calm in his relations with Trump the whole time, which I think has been sensible. But he has been strong. For example, look when Trump kind of humiliated Zelensky at the White House, it was Keir Starmer that stood up, immediately met Zelensky, brought European partners together. I think he has been strong in relations with America and other countries this whole time. And I think that he will continue to do that now.
Faisal, I mean, there is an argument that actually what good does it do, even if your language is stronger, as Emmanuel Macron's arguably is, where does it get you? It is actually the fact now that the UK does have lower tariffs than other countries.
Well, I think there is something about what our plan is and what the vision is for the economy in this country, and not to have that interdependence with the US, not to be, at the sharp end, and for us to have more leverage. And we actually do have some leverage, and we should use that. And so I think what our broader plan is to kind of pivot and look to the rest of the world is really important in that. But saying that, words do matter at this point. And I think when you look at the sorts of countries that Trump has backed off on, whether it be Brazil or China, they actually have stood up. They have taken quite clear action and been quite strong in their wording. And Mark Carney, right? He's not talking about taking Canada as much as he used to. And I think that's partly because of the way Mark Carney has reacted. So I think, it's a shame that we're sort of letting others lead and then deciding, because we are so on the back foot on this, and it's not going to stop at Greenland. That's not it. That's maybe this government's red line to go a bit stronger, but it's going to be across the board on lots of different things. So, the red line should have been when he came out on Ukraine. So we're already behind.
OK, that geopolitics, of course, dominating a lot of the news coverage at the moment. But the government wants today to be talking about warm homes, in particular a £15 billion scheme, what they call a rooftop revolution. This is what Ed Miliband had to say about it.
First of all, a £7,500 grant for a heat pump, which cuts the cost of installation. And the great thing is that we're confident that running a heat pump can be cheaper with the right tariff than running a boiler. So that's extending that opportunity to more people. And then secondly, low or no interest loans, where we're going to be working with the banks for things like solar panels.
Well, our climate correspondent, Esme Stallard, joins us now. And Esme, just tell us what the government's thinking is. What's the thinking behind all of this? And the fact that actually there have been some incentives introduced before, subsidies effectively, haven't there? How successful have they been?
Exactly. This plan's been touted for about 2 years, and finally today we actually get some of the detail behind it. Miliband there was mentioning £7,500 for heat pumps. That's an extension of an existing scheme. Effectively, they're looking to scale up the amount of support they're giving to households for 3 key technologies: solar panels, heat pumps and batteries. They're hoping long-term that can reduce energy bills, but also help to tackle the country's greenhouse gas emissions. But as you mentioned, this is not the first time Prime Ministers have tried to launch schemes to upgrade what's called the UK's very leaky housing stock. We had back in 2013 David Cameron's Green Deal, his eco scheme. The Green Deal was eventually scrapped because of issues with high interest rates for loans for energy upgrades. Eco scheme did carry on for a number of years, but this government in this plan has now announced that would be scrapped. And that's because that scheme was involved in providing insulation to homes, but was dodged by really bad headlines because of botched insulations. So that's now been got rid of. We then had Boris Johnson's Green Homes Grant, which was £1.5 billion. That was scrapped after 6 months. So we haven't had a great tale of these types of schemes, but there are some that have been successful. I mentioned the boiler upgrade scheme. That's been going for a few years. The government's now extending that for another year. And in fact, a lot of the money in this scheme is actually just going to boost existing ones that are in place, such as the Social Housing Fund. The new one they're offering is this Warm Homes Fund, where they want to give £600 million to low-income households to get these solar panels, these heat pumps, completely for free. But what they haven't outlined is how they will access that. They say they want to consult with the finance sector, the energy sector, to make sure some of those issues that other governments have faced with trying to roll out these types of programmes are not faced again. We also have a couple of different things also in this plan, particularly around renters reform. So they're confirming that today, that by 2030, landlords will have to make sure that all rental properties meet EPC rating. That's an energy efficiency rating up from E, and that will obviously is something that social housing charities like Nesta have been calling for, because they felt previously a lot of plans have very much focused on homeowners. The other thing we were also looking for in the plan, which I've been going through but can't seem to find, is key guidelines for future home standards. So how will future homes be designed? They said we'll have to wait a few more months for that. They did say, though, that by default, all of those new homes will have to have solar panels. But environmentalists are concerned that actually they're not going to require them to have heat pumps. And obviously, with Labour's plan to build 1.5 million homes, that can mean a lot more homes with gas boilers that then will have to be retrofitted in the future with these lower carbon technologies.
OK, Esme, thank you very much indeed for filling us in on all of that. Sarah, Richard Tice of Reform UK says that all this will be doing is subsidising Chinese-made solar panels and heat pumps.
No, the whole point of this is that we were elected to do something about the cost of living crisis and to have a more environmentally friendly country for the future and to ensure our energy security in Britain. This huge policy today does all of those things. People have been struggling for years, working hard, but they cannot pay their bills. And at the heart of that has been energy bills. We have some of the most energy inefficient homes in the entire of Europe in this country. And today we are announcing that if you're from a low income household, you're going to be able to get the entire cost of installing solar panels and a battery on your home. That is going to make a massive difference.
How quickly will bills come down, do you think?
So we're going to have obviously £150 on average off bills from April. So we're not waiting. That was announced in the budget. That's a really big deal. And this is going to be rolled out over the coming years. But this is about the long-term future of Britain. We need action on bills right now. We are doing that. But this is also about the future of our country in terms of being environmentally friendly, bringing down our emissions, ensuring that we're relying on energy that's renewable, that's produced here, rather than oil and gas imported from abroad. And I think the fact that we're targeting a lot of this money for low-income households who suffer the most from energy, high energy bills, I think is really important. It goes to the heart of what the Labour Party in government is about.
Joe?
So 4 out of 5 homeowners won't benefit from this latest Warm Homes announcement. I want to see bills coming down for everyone. Ed Miliband said at the last election that bills would come down by £300. In fact, they went up by £200. I want to see energy bills coming down for everyone, and this will affect just a small amount of people. It's an announcement, not a plan. There are still a whole load of details we don't know. And I too would have concerns about some of the quality of work when you're rushing out heat pumps, some of them potentially installed in properties that aren't suitable for heat pumps either. So I want to see the detail, but ultimately it's not benefiting most people from their high energy costs.
Pfizer?
I mean, out of all of the ministers that we have, it seems like Ed Miliband is way more on it than the others. And it is positive news. And yeah, the scale is not there, a lot of the detail's not there, but I think this is certainly the sorts of things that we want to see, a really serious look at how we deal with our huge problem of heat loss in our homes. There's apparently 9.6 million homes in this country. I mean, I heard Ed Miliband say earlier they hope that this reaches 5 million homes, but obviously that's still not the scale we need. I would say that there is a big question here about the distributional impacts and the behavioural responses from people, because even taking an interest-free loan, you still have to make repayments, right? Cost of living crisis. A lot of people, taxes are going up partly because of this Chancellor and because of the Conservatives before. You know, it's not a great time for people to think, oh, I'm going to take another loan. So unless they see that energy price fall quite quickly and their bills go down as they're taking on those loans, it won't make sense for a lot of people. So I think, you know, there's a lot of good stuff there, but I wonder if they've really looked at the behavioural responses from people, given where we are on cost of living.
Sarah, that's a fair point, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, so for low-income families, the entire cost of installing solar and batteries is going to be covered. That's worth between £9,000 and £12,000. We think that is a really massive deal, and I would hope that would be welcomed, because energy poverty is such a terrible issue. You know, I go and see families in my constituency, and their houses are freezing, and they might be heating only one room, and this is going to make a proper impact.
And have you any idea how much the savings might be?
Well, we think so. The estimation was potentially £500 a year off your energy bills, but one energy organisation estimated it might be £1,000 off. So this is really important for the future. This is the future of our country. This is the future of all countries' renewable energy. And this is a government that's trying to create a modern country which supports people, which brings down people's bills and which secures our environment and our world, in fact, for the future. And so I think this is a really important policy we've enacted today.
I mean, that's the point. It's an immediate impact. If the whole thing is being paid for some low-income houses, actually the bills come down immediately.
I'm not sure there's anything immediate about Ed Miliband's announcement today. I want to see bills coming down for everyone, just like Ed Miliband promised when he tried to get elected 2 years ago. I want to see bills coming down for everyone so that it's not just a minority on a scheme that may well end up only partially delivering what even Ed Miliband wants it to do.
But Sarah's point is that actually it's good for bills coming down, but it's also good for the environment longer term.
This is taxpayer money, by the way. This isn't money that sort of the government's magicked out of thin air and is giving away. This is taxpayer money. We have the highest taxes in this country in history, and that money is being used to spend on a scheme which 4 out of 5 homes won't benefit from.
So, Pfizer, should taxpayers' money be going on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is an argument here about the long-term benefits to this country and energy bills ultimately coming down. And the way, years ago I was in this meeting with all these the sorts of people at Davos right now, CEOs, and one of the things they said is that, they are attracted to countries with low energy bills. And that's, of course, they need their workers to be able to get by, but also, generally we need to look at our energy sector, and we have some of the most expensive bills in the world. So I think we do need to look at that. But there is that point about how quickly those bills will come down versus the loan you're taking out every month. I know I would have to do that calculation, right? So I think some of that is unclear, and it's really important to get that detail quickly. And the communications around it, how this is then promoted to different families.
Joe, how would the Conservatives get bills down? Because lots of businesses complain, don't they, about the high cost of energy. It's well known that we have very, very high costs, and that is impacting the economy.
Yeah, well, I think we need to be careful about spending excessive levels of taxpayers' money on green projects that are only in their infancy. We don't want to be withdrawing gas and oil before renewables are ready to pick up in that space. And I think that's a worry. We need to grow the economy, bring down taxes. All of this is interconnected. It's about bringing down bills for everyone, not individual schemes that, even if they're delivered, only deliver for a small percentage of people.
Esme was talking there about some of the problems there have been in the past, and the National Audit Office, under previous schemes, said that 98% of homes that had external wall insulation installed under schemes had problems that will lead to damp and mould. I mean, there have been, with various schemes, problems with the quality of the work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the previous insulation schemes, there have been problems. I've dealt with people who've had those issues.
How do you stop that happening again?
Well, so the government did take action last year and paused all of the companies who had been identified as incorrectly installing some of this external wall insulation. But obviously the big element of this announcement is really focused on solar panels and also heat pumps for the future, as well as insulation. But you've got to get it right. And anyone who's been badly affected in the past, they should be getting remediation at no cost to themselves. And the government said that Ofgem had to sort all of this out. But, you want to get all these green technologies right for the future. But the Conservatives left us exposed to extremely high spikes in oil and gas prices from abroad, having to import things from, countries with governments we wouldn't want to be dealing with. So Labour is trying to future-proof our country so that we can bring down people's bills and we can actually kind of support our environmental aims and kind of stopping climate change overall.
OK, let's talk about something that's really got some traction over the last couple of weeks, which is a student debt. Have a look at this headline in the Telegraph, which says that scandalous student debts are crushing the economy. It says rocketing interest rates on loans risk leaving graduates and the country with a £500 billion problem. Joining us in the studio is Tom Allingham from Save the Student. Thank you for coming in to speak to us. What's going on here? Just give us the broader picture of why this does seem to be a building, if you like, scandal, some students call it. Why are they saying that?
Yes, so it relates to Plan 2 student loans, which are the student loans that came in 2012 when tuition fees famously trebled to £9,000 a year. And under that plan, you repay for 30 years, you repay 9% of your income over a threshold, but crucially, the interest is charged at RPI plus up to 3%. And it's that bit, I think, that's getting a lot of attention at the moment, because millions of graduates are finding that although they're repaying, in some cases, thousands of pounds a year on their loan, their debt is still growing.
I mean, some people will say it is effectively a graduate tax, that ultimately they will earn more because they've gone to university.
Yes.
So why shouldn't they repay it?
I mean, I would have some sympathy with that, in the sense that I do believe there are some aspects of it that are more like a tax than like a loan. I think the issue, though, is that, and I think it was Nadia Whittome tweeted the other day, that since becoming an MP, she's now in the top 5% of earners in the UK and has been for however long she's been an MP. But in that time, her total debt has only decreased by £1,000. So even someone on that level of salary is struggling to repay their loan. And I think that's the issue, that even if you do go on to earn a very high salary, you're still actually quite unlikely to repay your loan. And
is there some suggestion as well that this is having an impact on the wider economy?
I mean, there were some stats released last week, I think, from the House of Commons that the total level of interest being added to loans was, I think, 3 times the amount that had been repaid last year. So I think it was 5 billion repaid, £15 billion of interest added just last year. So it does kind of seem like a ticking time bomb that at some point this is going to have something done to it.
OK, Sarah, there are lots of people saying that this is just not a fair situation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was this big change in 2012. And as a personal example, I went to university before that, so I'm on plan one, but my brother and sister went to university afterwards, and they have been paying back money every month, and their loan is higher than it originally was. So I understand the kind of overall difficulties. I think also we had a big problem in that the maintenance loans weren't going up. So a lot of the students from low-income households got to university and they could not pay their bills. So either they were kind of working all hours to have to compensate for that and really changing their university experience, but people who've got Bank of Mum and Dad were absolutely fine. And there's other issues with how the loans are paid in the first place. You know, the Conservatives scrapped maintenance grants to low-income students. We're going to bring those back, which is going to be really good. But I had a terrible story from a student in my area where he doesn't have family money, and he had applied to student finance, but they didn't give him his money on time. So he was supposed to live for his second year in a shared house with all his friends. They had money to be able to pay for their deposits. He didn't have any money. Student finance didn't give him it, so he couldn't live with them. And he ended up living completely on his own in a more expensive place that he had to get once his finance came in. So I think there's lots of difficult problems with this system, and the government is trying to address some of them. So we're bringing back maintenance grants. We are giving care experienced young people immediate access to full maintenance loans. But there's definitely issues in the whole system. And, you know, we're also very interested in trying to make apprenticeships work well for young people too. And we've made lots of big announcements on that.
Joe, do you think the system's working?
I think the other side of this argument is what graduates can be expected to get paid. Now, somebody may be able to carry a certain level of debt if they get that well-paid job that was their ambition from the outset, and they can start paying that debt off. But I think for too many students, not only do they come out with a large debt, also their job prospects are far more limited than they were led to believe when they were encouraged to go to university or study a particular course. So I do think we need to look again at how we charge students for some university courses which offer little or no prospects of a better paid job than, say, going through an apprenticeship route. And by the way, that means you don't have the debt when you come out at the end of it.
Faiza, do you think the system needs to change?
Absolutely. I think this is an absolute racket. Like last time, actually, one of the last times I was on this show, we were also talking about student loans. And at that time, I said that a graduate tax would be much better. And everyone on the panel fought back because it's this interest point. In so many ways, we've privatised our public sector. And that also happens with our student loans. When I went to uni in the noughties, I ended up in like 17 grand of debt, but I paid it off over 10 years. That was more manageable. But what's happened to our student loans and the way that it's been handed over to make money out of in this way that is so deeply unfair and results in lots of inequalities because the richest don't have to take out these loans or have lower levels of loans. And the idea that young people working year after year, paying off the debt apparently, but actually not paying it off at all, paying off the interest, it's meaning that they're not having kids, you know, they're not buying houses, they're having to make very different decisions. And so I think not only should we look again, but we should fundamentally overhaul this system and look at a graduate tax system that means that we don't have this situation with the interest rates, which is appalling.
So do you think it should be funded by the taxpayer? You're not saying that, are you?
I'm saying that
should be a graduate tax.
I'm saying that young people should not come out of university, or anyone that goes to university shouldn't come out of uni thinking, right, I've got £55,000 of debt after paying money for 5 years, having more than £57,000 of debt, right? And
the government will be writing off a lot of that, won't they, after 30 years or 40 years?
Yeah, but how can you, in the meantime, right? So it makes more sense for us to pay that up front and to charge a graduate tax, and it's a way to bring back that money. And so you're taking out the interest. Like some companies are making a lot of money out of this, a lot of money out of young people educating themselves. And so and the university sector as well is in a lot of trouble. So we need to really, this isn't like a little bit here, a little bit there approach. This is absolutely needs a fundamental overhaul. And I know that the university sector and many students will say the same thing. So I think the government really needs to listen here.
Tom, do you detect a growing dissatisfaction amongst students? Do you think it's always been there, or do you think it's a change?
I think it's always been there. I think in the early stages of Plan 2, there was definitely a sense, and I was in the first cohort on this plan, so 2012, that's when I started university. There was definitely a sense of, we probably won't pay it off in full, but you know, it will get cancelled at the end, and you know, the repayments threshold will rise each year in line with our earnings, so it should be broadly manageable. The issue is that for the 10 years in which I'd been eligible to repay, so the 10 years of Plan 2, that repayment threshold, which we promised would raise every single year with earnings, has been frozen for 4 out of the 10 years. And in the last budget, the government announced that it will be frozen from this April for an additional 3 years. So that would mean out of the, I think, 13 years, by that point, it will be frozen for 7 years, over half the number of years it's been around. And it's the same issue that we're having with income tax, where if you freeze the threshold, graduates are now paying more and starting from a lower salary to start repaying. So I think changes like that are leading to the kind of growing discontent that we've seen in the past few weeks.
And do students think they're getting value for money?
I mean, according to our money survey that we run every year, I think it's around half say that no, university isn't good value for money. And I think, you know, it's also important to take into context things like COVID, for example, where students were in many cases kind of not given adequate information by the government in terms of whether or not they'd be allowed to go in person to lectures or the rest of it. Maintenance loans, not keeping up with inflation. All of these things add together to say that I think current university students and recent graduates have had a very, very rough deal.
Have a look at this headline in the New Statesman. This refers to a speech made by Andy Burnham, of course, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, setting out the case for a business-friendly socialism and saying that Britain is still in hock to the bond markets. I mean, the suggestion there, Sarah, really is that the government needs to borrow more to fund some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the bond markets sort of matter, so I don't think we should just be, you know, dismissing them. But on these points, I do think there is generational inequality in this country. So it's not just the student finance system. It's the fact that young people have got kind of jobs which are insecure and low paid, that we're facing a housing crisis, that public service has been degraded over years and years and years. The cost of childcare is astronomical. And we are trying to do something about all of those things. So we've massively raised the minimum wage, particularly for young people. We've introduced the Workers' Rights Bill to protect people at work. We've got the Renters' Rights Bill. We have just announced the biggest investment in a social and affordable housing for 50 years. We're giving people free childcare for 30 hours, free breakfast clubs in schools, free lunches for families who are on universal credit for their kids in school. These are things which are intended to address that kind of generational inequality which young people and kind of young families are facing. And we're taking the sensible tax measures to be able to pay for those things as well.
Faiza?
This government is not taking inequality in this country seriously enough. And actually it relates to Davos. We have a situation in the world now where the billionaires, their wealth went up a record amount last year. This is a new Oxfam report. And they're all meeting in Davos. There was a time when multi-corporations would come to government. Now our world leaders go to them. What's happened in the world in this extreme inequality and extreme wealth buildup is that they are having a huge influence on our politics. And I know, because I talk to people in Treasury and elsewhere, that you guys were massively lobbied by the city on various different things, on things you could have done on the banking levy, instead of raising income taxes. So, you know, you can reel off these lists, but at the same time, if you're unwilling to do with the concentration of wealth in this country and something really serious about the inequality, you know, whether it be a wealth tax, whether it be about equalising capital gains, we're just not going to see the kind of changes that we need to see to block this intergenerational inequality that you rightly talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have done lots of wealth taxes. We have asked people who have more money to pay more. So, for example, we raised the minimum wage in the budget and we've introduced a mansion tax. We've raised capital gains tax. We've put taxes on private schools, private jets, windfall taxes. You know, we have done lots of things to say if you've got more money, then you are going to pay a bit more into the system. And we might have not gone as far as you would like, but the idea that we haven't very significantly changed the tax system
to
ask people to pay more.
Because wealth advisors say that you haven't. They're telling wealthy people, don't worry, this budget doesn't affect you.
But capital gains, which is where people who have assets are making money, free money basically, off accumulation of their assets, we have increased capital gains tax.
Well,
That's
you didn't equalise it though.
But we have significantly increased.
This is what I'm saying. A little bit of this and that here and there. It's not going to change the system overall. It's just not. We're in a situation, you're right, you inherited a terrible situation from the Tories. This world in which Trump is in charge, we are in a precarious situation in all kinds of ways. And we're hearing whether it's student loans, social housing, there's all sorts of ways in which the private sector has completely undermined our system. And unless you're willing to do things like make water publicly owned again and these big things, you're just not going to deliver for people.
Joe, what do you say to that, the idea that the private sector has undermined the system?
The single biggest thing you can do as a government to help, not just young people, but everyone, is grow the economy. Then you don't need to raise a single extra tax, because as the economy grows, your tax take grows. We see the Chancellor now over two budget rounds, who has taxed jobs and therefore driven up, particularly for young people, unemployment. While the tax level remains so high and businesses are constrained in their ability to go on and employ people and grow, we're going to be stuck in this cycle of trying to tax things to redistribute money, and the economy stalls. And ultimately, you've only got a finite pot if you can't grow the economy.
I think this is almost a case of amnesia. I mean, we had 14 years of incredibly low growth in this country under the Tory government. We inherited the highest tax rate since the 1980s. I mean, the idea
Well, if you talk
that
about
you did those
we inherited the 2008 financial
but you
crisis
had public
from Gordon
services
Brown.
at
I mean, people aren't interested in this. They want to know what
levels.
you're going to do. You've got a huge majority
I've just
in
laid out
Parliament.
what we're going to do.
And what people have seen in the last 18 months is frankly deeply worrying, and most people just wish that you'd never come into office in the first place, and they're looking for an alternative. So I think we all need to stand up and accept that tinkering around is not going to do anything. It's about growing the economy and getting more people into jobs, including young people, improved job prospects for young people.
I mean, Sarah, there has been obviously a lot of talk about, of course, about the economy and the lack of growth, and actually that measures taken by your government have actually had the opposite effect on businesses.
Look, I think that sometimes when you pull tax levers, such as raising national insurance contributions for businesses, which enable you to invest in the NHS, which enabled us to bring waiting lists down month on month, year on year, obviously they do have an impact, but the wider problems in the economy are long-standing, and they're particularly to do with lack of investment, and we are righting those years of difficulty. And, you know, in my area, we have had chronic problems with underinvestment in education. We're turning the tide on that. In the budget, we announced every small and medium-sized business in this country, if they take on a young person under 25, we will pay the entire cost of their apprenticeship training. These are things that are really going to have a real-life impact on people, create jobs, raise wages, help people get on in life when they work hard and do the right thing. And yes, there's been years and years of problems, but we are turning the tide on those things. And, you know, there's always more to do. But I do think the idea that our workers' rights bill, renters' rights, investment in housing, massive changes in the NHS waiting lists, all those things are what the country voted for. And that's exactly what this Labour government is delivering. OK, we're going to cross to the House of Commons. But thank you to Tom for coming in and speaking to us about student debt. This is the scene in the House of Commons right now. And I'd like to welcome viewers on the BBC News channel as we prepare for Prime Minister's questions. Keir Starmer, of course, will be quizzed by Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader. Keir Starmer has chosen not to go to Davos, where there is a large group of world leaders gathering, and President Trump, of course, about to go there and I think just arriving, actually. I think his plane's just landed in Switzerland. But it could well be that he gets asked about his approach to President Trump, those threats over tariffs, over Greenland, and maybe, of course, what's going on about the Chagos Islands as well. That could all well come up, as well as maybe questions about the economy. And Sarah, just go back to what is dominating everything, which is geopolitics and President Trump. The idea that Keir Starmer is playing this softly, if you like, that he's getting his way, there is a growing feeling amongst Labour MPs that actually it's not working. I'm just not sure that's true. I think that kind of the strength that Keir Starmer's shown, which is that being consistent in the approach to Donald Trump, saying what Britain thinks and what's in our interests and working with partners, that has led to us getting the first trade deal with America. We've been working to try and support Ukraine and kind of standing up to Donald Trump on that front. And we'll continue to do that. And we think the same for Greenland. So I think that so far he has been, you know, he has been strong in response to Trump, and he will continue to do that.
Do you think Kemi Badenoch thinks that there's mileage in quizzing the Prime Minister over his approach to Donald Trump? Or actually, does she recognise that when it comes to diplomacy, it's not as easy to, you know, to just mouth off, basically? It's not that easy.
I mean, we're about to find out the question she's going to go on today. I'm sure there's mileage in quizzing the Prime Minister. Whether she'll do that now or not, I don't know. But yeah, clearly we need to get behind the Prime Minister in the national interest to do the right thing and be strong with Donald Trump. Yeah, international diplomacy is a little bit different to domestic politics, but that doesn't mean the Prime Minister should get let off the hook if he doesn't do the job of Prime Minister internationally. But we've got to encourage him to do so. And ultimately, the proof will be in the pudding. I mean, Sarah talks about the trade deals. No good if he slaps tariffs on us. But I wish the Prime Minister well. I want him to succeed on that.
Faisal, we've seen the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, actually be a lot more robust, a lot more critical of the president. Do you think that's the right approach?
Yeah, I think that works for Ed Davey very well. And I think, you know, him not going to the state dinner, I think history will make him look good for making that decision, actually. And I think it already looks good. I mean, the way that we rolled out the red carpet. Just on this point about Starmer looking strong, you know, I've knocked on doors, canvassed for many years. Now the main thing that comes up for people is not less about an individual policy, but just their hate for him. and their hate for the Labour Party. It's become really ugly out there. And of course, he has really low poll ratings. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, you will be hearing it yourself that people really, really dislike him. And I think he's got to go a long way to turn things around. And I'm hearing from Labour people as well that there is a lot of talk. I mean, we know this. They're kind of being quite upfront about it, West Street and the rest of them, that, like, you know, they're getting ready for a leadership challenge after the local elections, because they expect, yes, to lose quite heavily to Reform, but also to lose to the left, where they're losing, you know, a lot of voters because of various different positions, foreign policy and otherwise. And so, you know, I think to sit here and say that there isn't disquiet about Starmer, either on the street or within the Labour Party, you know, that's just not true.
So what do you say about that? You must be worried about the poll ratings. And particularly Keir Starmer's personal ratings. They are incredibly low.
I think people have distrust in politics generally, and I completely understand
why. But his
why.
ratings personally are very low.
Yeah, but that's not so. Of course, I have been knocking on doors for the Labour Party for the last 15 years, and I have never had a time where there wasn't some complaints about one of our leaders. Like, that's just never happened. In politics, people always have complaints about particular personalities. But I also think people respect that he is standing up for our country, but also we're delivering a domestic agenda where we're raising people's wages, we're sorting out the NHS, and this is what he was elected to do.
To the House of Commons for Prime Minister's questions.
Mr. Speaker. In recent days, I've spoken extensively to our international allies, including European leaders and others, the US and NATO. We will continue to engage constructively to resolve issues, particularly relating to international security, applying the principles and values that I set out on Monday. Mr. Speaker, in addition this week, the government has announced a landmark investment to support children with special educational needs, overhauled our water system, and today launched a £15 billion plan to create warm homes. At home and abroad, this Labour government is delivering for the British people. This meeting I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We face an affordability crisis in this country. In the short term, our dependence on fossil fuels lead to a rise in energy bills, and in the longer term, the aftershocks of Thatcher mean there are not enough good non-graduate jobs. And that's why today's Warm Homes plan is such good news. Making life affordable. Batteries, solar, home insulation. Getting bills down, wages rising, making life affordable. But we must go further. So can I ask the Prime Minister, they would do even more to make sure that life is affordable for my...
The Prime Minister. Can I thank my honourable friend? I know how much he cares about making life affordable. Mr. Speaker, we're taking £150 off energy bills. That's £300 for the 6 million poorest families, including almost 3,700 households in his constituency. The Warm Homes plan we're announcing today is the biggest ever public investment in upgrading British homes. It will lift 1 million households out of fuel poverty, tackling the cost of living. That's the difference a Labour government makes.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the Prime Minister following our lead on children accessing social media? In particular, can I thank the Shadow Education Secretary, 61 Labour MPs and the Greater Manchester Mayor for forcing him to think again. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and I agree. The future of Greenland should only be decided by the people of Greenland. When the Prime Minister made this point to President Trump on Monday, did the President agree or disagree?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, engaging constructively on international security matters hugely, particularly when it comes to security in the Arctic, and that's the context in which this discussion is going on in relation to Greenland. As we engage constructively, I have made my position clear on our principles and values. The first of those is that the future of Greenland is for the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The second is that threats of tariffs to pressurise allies are completely wrong. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to engage constructively. I've had many international calls in recent days, and the Prime Minister of Denmark is coming to the United Kingdom tomorrow for bilateral talks. But I do want to be clear with the House. I will not yield, Britain will not yield on our principles and values about the future of Greenland under threats of tariffs. And that is my clear position.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad to hear the Prime Minister say that. We all know that the people of Greenland do not want to be ruled by America. But does he agree that just as those in Greenland should decide their own future, so should the Chagossians?
Mr. Speaker, I've made out my position on Greenland absolutely clear on Monday and a moment ago. President Trump deployed words on Chagos yesterday that were different to his previous words of welcome and support when I met him in the White House. He deployed those words yesterday for the express purpose of putting pressure on me and Britain in relation to my values and principles on the future of Greenland. Mr. Speaker, he wants me to yield on my position, and I'm not going to do so. Given that that was his express purpose, I'm surprised the Leader of the Opposition has jumped on the bandwagon. I had understood her position. Mr. Speaker, I had understood her position to be that she supported the government's position on the future of Greenland. Now she appears to support words by President Trump to undermine the government's position on the future of Greenland. She's chosen naked opportunism over the national interest.
Mr. Speaker, we'll note that when I asked him what the President told him, he couldn't tell us. Now he expects us to believe he knows what's going on in President Trump's mind. Let me remind him. His Deputy Prime Minister, then Foreign Secretary, used to say that if President Trump didn't like the deal, it wouldn't go ahead. And let's look at what President Trump actually said. The Chagos deal is an act of great stupidity and a sign of total weakness. We didn't need President Trump to tell us that. We've been saying this for 12 months. And let's remind the Prime Minister, President Trump thought that we were doing this, that the Prime Minister is doing this for money. The Prime Minister is giving away territory we own and paying £35 billion for the privilege. Why doesn't he just scrap this terrible deal and put the money into our armed forces?
Prime Minister. The words from President Trump were expressly intended to put pressure on me to yield on my principle. What he said about Chagos was literally in the same sentence as what he said about Greenland. That was his purpose. And the future of Greenland is a binary issue that is splitting the world at the moment with material consequences. I've been clear and consistent in my position on the future of Greenland. The future is for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The Leader of the Opposition has taken 3 positions in 10 days. 10 days ago, she said Greenland was, in her words, a second-order issue. 4 days ago, she said she supported our position on Greenland. Now she's backing arguments intended to undermine our position, Britain's position on Greenland. This is an important national moment, and yet again, the Leader of the Opposition has shown she is incapable of rising to it.
I've already told him we agree on Greenland. I'm asking about the Chagos deal. That money, that £35 billion, should go to the armed forces. Mr. Speaker, the world is changing. We are in a very different place, the most dangerous international environment since the end of the Cold War. Last week, the head of the armed forces, not me, the head of the armed forces warned that our military faces a £28 billion shortfall. Is he right?
Prime Minister! Mr. Speaker, I'm proud we're spending more on defence than any time since the last Labour government. The Strategic Defence Review It's back the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. That's £270 billion this Parliament, making defence an engine of growth. That is a stark contrast. Ben Wallace, the longest-serving Conservative Defence Secretary, openly admitted that under their watch, our armed forces were hollowed out.
Order, order, order. Mr. Bowitt and Mr. Cartledge, it is continuous week in, week out, and there's a couple over here who will also be going out for a cup of tea with you. Please, calm it down, or you know the consequence. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, they shout on a Wednesday and they defect on a Thursday. The loudest shouter used to be the former Shadow Justice. We should take a note of who's shouting most loudly this week.
Kevin Bernal.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to talk about defections. Let me tell him that when I had someone undermining my party, I sacked him. If he sacked... Mr. Speaker, if he sacked...
We're going to get through this Prime Minister's questions. I want to hear the Leader of the Opposition and I want to hear the Prime Minister. Those who don't may leave the chamber. Kemi Bendel.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that if he sacked everyone undermining his party, his front bench would be empty. But these questions I'm asking, these questions, but jokes aside, these questions are about our national interest. These questions are about our national interest. We support our armed forces in every possible way. Later today, my party will vote to protect our veterans from unfair prosecution. He is ordering his MPs to vote against them. In our national interest, and for the sake of all the brave people in the armed forces, past, present and future, will the Prime Minister do the right thing and vote in support of our veterans, not against them?
Mr. Speaker, she's claiming strength. She read the guy's defection letter and then at that point decided to sack him. What was she going to do? Correct the typos and give it back to him? She should have sacked him when he made disgraceful comments about faces in Birmingham, and she failed to do so. And she smiles, saying it's a good thing she's cleared out, a good thing there's fewer Tory MPs. The rest of the country agrees with her completely in relation to that. On the question of veterans' protection, under the last government, they passed legislation which was struck down, leaving our veterans utterly exposed. We're putting in place proper measures to protect them.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to talk about leadership. Three of his own cabinet ministers told the Times on Saturday that he needed to learn from me.
Order! I'll tell you now, I'm having no more. Do we understand each other? Thank you. Kemi Bendel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But back to the national interest. Instead of acting in it, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister just tries to get through the day. On the Chinese spy hub embassy, he's too weak. On Chagos, he's too weak. On funding for the armed forces, he's too weak. On protecting our veterans from prosecution, he's too weak. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I will support the Prime Minister when he does the right thing. But time after time, this Prime Minister has done the wrong thing for our country. Isn't the truth that he is too weak to stand up for our national interests?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've spent the week working with our NATO allies to protect our national security and ensure we have unity in NATO. That's a matter of national importance. She's utterly failed to rise to the occasion and show the solidarity she could have shown in this House. She spent the week trying to hold together what's left of the Tory party. And she says I should learn from her. She has no judgment. Only a week ago, she was saying in relation to Greenland, she shrugged and said it's some second-order issue. Terrible judgment. Then she flip-flopped with 3 different positions in 10 days on Greenland. She said Liz Truss's mini-budget was 100% right. She said last week she was 100% confident there'll be no more defections just before the latest defection. I'm beginning to think her judgment isn't 100% reliable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. NHS waiting lists in Birmingham are down by almost a quarter under Labour and still falling. That's more than 28,000 people no longer stuck waiting for essential treatment. Yes, there are challenges still, but they are being addressed and progress is being made. Does he agree that this progress must be sustained, including by reducing ambulance waiting times?
Minister. I'm pleased to confirm, Mr. Speaker, that last week saw the second biggest fall in NHS waiting times for 15 years. Waiting lists down by more than 300,000, recruitment of GPs an extra 2,900, and ambulances are arriving nearly 15 minutes faster this winter than they were last year. There is much more to do. That's why we're delivering the biggest upgrade to our ambulance fleet for many years. That progress has been made possible by Labour's decisions that were opposed by the parties opposite.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We remember how Tony Blair ignored warnings from these benches and tied himself to an unpopular American president and a disastrous foreign policy, while close allies like Canada and France looked on in horror. With Donald Trump increasingly acting like a crime boss running a protection racket, threatening to smash up our economy unless he gets his hands on Greenland, will the Prime Minister avoid Blair's historic mistake, take our advice this time, and join Prime Minister Carney and President Macron in standing up far more strongly to President Trump?
Prime Minister.
Well, he clearly isn't listening. I said I will not yield on the principles and values that I uphold, this country upholds in relation to the future of Greenland. But the relationship with the US matters, especially on defence, security and intelligence and nuclear capability, also on trade and prosperity. Mr. Speaker, whilst he's trying to get sound bites, we mustn't forget a war is raging in Europe. It is in its 4th year. The Russians are raining bombs down on Ukrainian civilians day and night. Temperatures were -20 in Kyiv last night. 60% is without power. People are erecting tents to keep themselves warm. We have to work with our allies, including the US, on security guarantees to make sure we can do what we must do in relation to Ukraine. Now, that does not mean we agree with the US on everything, and I've been absolutely clear on my position on Greenland and my position on tariffs, but it is foolhardy to think that we should rip up our relationship with the US, abandon Ukraine, and so many other things that are important to our defence, security and intelligence.
Of course, we're not arguing that, Mr. Speaker. We're arguing he follows France and Canada, our close allies. But here's one thing that we can agree on, Mr. Speaker, that the UK strengthens our defensive capabilities, like the Prime Minister said earlier. But, Mr. Speaker, the government is going far too slow in investing in our defensive industries. It hasn't even published the defence investment plan that was promised last autumn. And that delay is putting critical industries like helicopter manufacturing based in Yeovil at risk. Putin is waging a war in Europe. Trump is threatening to undermine NATO. We have to rearm fast. So why won't the Prime Minister just get on with buying great British helicopters made in the West Country?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's about the cheer across the whole country. Mr. Speaker, we are increasing defence spend to the biggest spend since the last Labour government. We are doing that because of the decisions we took at the budget in relation to the money that's available. He wants more money on defence spending. He wants it faster. What did he do at the budget? Did he stand up and say, I support this? No, he voted against it, against the measures necessary to carry out the upgrade.
Steve Yem.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, on Christmas Day, my constituent, Beryl Barrett, passed away after tragically falling into an unrepaired pothole, and I'm sure the whole House will wish to share my condolences with the family. In my constituency of Mansfield, there are literally thousands of potholes in our roads which Notts County Council are failing to repair. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's time the Council took action to repair our roads? And will he meet with Beryl's family so that we can work together to ensure that no more accidents like this happen again?
Prime Minister.
Can I send my deepest sympathies to Beryl's family, and I will make sure the Roads Minister meets the family at the earliest opportunity. Mr. Speaker, it shows why tackling potholes really matters. We're investing £2 billion in East Midlands to fix the roads and improve local transport. We're also putting in place tough new standards so that councils must prove they're fixing roads properly. And I'm pleased many excellent Labour councils across the country are leading by example.
Dr. Ellie-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For decades, our rivers, lakes and seas have paid the price of a failing system, so the Water White Paper is a welcome first step in beginning to set things right. But there's a glaring gap. Agricultural pollution contributes 40% of the pollution in our waterways, but merits only one single page in this white paper. Can the PM tell me why on earth this is the case, and when he will start working with farmers to support river-friendly farming practices and treat agricultural pollution as seriously as sewage pollution?
Prime Minister.
We inherited a real mess on water, and we're taking the most effective and far-reaching measures to deal with it. But I have to say, as someone who stood to lead her party, I wonder what she makes of how her leader is responding to this global uncertainty. Because what he's saying is this is the time, this is the moment to withdraw from NATO. This is the time to kick the US out of our military bases. This is the time to negotiate, hear this, with Putin to give up our nuclear deterrent. I'm sure Putin will be very quick on the line for that one. It's as reckless and irresponsible as their plan to legalise heroin and crack cocaine. That's the Green Party now. High on drugs, soft on Putin.
Can I just say, we don't ask opposition questions that come into the Prime Minister, not the other way around. Right, let us move on. Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. West Dunbartonshire is set to benefit from record UK Labour government investment. £60 million of local growth funding just announced for the Glasgow City region, to add to the £20 million for Dumbarton Town Centre regeneration. Add to that the £20 million Pride in Place funding for my hometown of Clydebank, and the £1.5 million immediate impact funding. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this is in stark contrast to the SNP, who abandoned their communities, and demonstrates the difference a Labour government makes to West Dunbartonshire and to Scotland?
Well, I'm very pleased, Mr. Speaker, we're backing his hometown of Clydebank with £20 million of Pride in Place funding. And just this week we hosted a reception meeting people working hard to change their neighbourhoods across the whole of the United Kingdom. That's Labour delivering on national renewal. And as he rightly says, compare that to the SNP, more interested in squabbling over independence than using a record settlement to fix Scotland's public services.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Challenging economic inactivity and supporting the vulnerable across the country is something that we all want to address. So would you be surprised to learn that in Northern Ireland around 11,000 people previously supported by the UK Shared Prosperity funding programmes will see those programmes cut dramatically, compounded with 400 job losses? So can I ask the Prime Minister, does he support those cuts of those vital programmes? And will he arrange an urgent meeting for me with the relevant decision maker in government and the organisations who have been impacted so that these changes and challenges can be resolved?
Prime Minister.
We've delivered a record settlement for Northern Ireland in the budget to strengthen public services and to kickstart growth. And the Local Growth Fund, designed actually in partnership with the Executive, will see £45 million every year to support local growth. But I'm very happy to make sure that ministers meet him to discuss the particular concerns that he has.
Kirsten.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1.5 million women in the UK live with endometriosis, which is a painful and life-changing condition. As chair of the Endometriosis APPG, I met Jessica Smith and Endo Warriors West Lothian to discuss their campaigns for a national endometriosis registry to capture and audit diagnosis, treatment and outcomes. Will he join me to commend the work of Jessica, Endo Warriors West Lothian and Endometriosis UK? And will he meet with me to discuss creating a registry to improve the lives of women living with endometriosis?
Prime Minister.
Well, let me pay tribute to her and all women and others who are campaigning on these vitally important issues. Far too many women are left waiting in serious pain for care, and that's why we're investing £8 million in research on diagnosis, treatment and pain management. I know the Minister for Women's Health will be keen to talk to her about her proposals and the issues, and I thank her for raising it.
Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a constituent not yet 30 years old, a civil servant who's just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. She has been told she has a very short time to live. Because of her condition, she was given a retirement date, which was just last week. She has not received notification of any actual pension payment and has spent long hours trying to contact Capita. HMRC has claimed that all outstanding documentation has been supplied to Capita in November. I've written to the Chancellor, contacted the MP hotline and Capita. It still remains unresolved. Can the Prime Minister, along with the Chancellor, help to get this action resolved immediately?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising this case, and I'm truly sorry to hear about his constituent. If he wouldn't mind following up with the details of the case, I will make sure that it's dealt with urgently on behalf of his constituent.
Coyle.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I welcomed Bermondsey PC Kevin Webster to Parliament after his recognition as Met's PC of the Year 2025. Will the Prime Minister commend Kevin for his local work and that of Southwark Labour Council's amazing nighttime antisocial behaviour team? Will he tell us when they'll have new powers under the Crime and Policing Bill? And will he remind the Met that its access standards require all local officers like Kevin to be a maximum 20-minute walk from their ward, a policy currently going unmet in Rotherhithe?
Prime Minister.
Can I congratulate Kevin and thank police across our country working hard to protect our communities? The party opposite decimated local policing, and we're restoring it. There will be 3,000 more neighbourhood police on our streets by spring, an example of the change people will feel this year. Our Crime and Policing Bill will give officers more powers to tackle knife crime, shoplifting and antisocial behaviour. I want officers to have those powers as swiftly as possible. The Tories and Reform voted against them.
My constituents in Chester South and Eddisbury are deeply concerned by proposed cuts to police community support officers across Cheshire. The Labour Police and Crime Commissioner, Dan Price, was silent on this issue, seemingly content to see numbers slashed across the county until residents and local MPs spoke out. Now he seeks to present himself as campaigning to save PCSOs, whilst proposing to substantially increase the precept, all at the same time as planning to increase spending on his office by £513,000 next year. Does the Prime Minister agree that this represents a failure of leadership and that that money would be far better spent increasing PCSOs on our streets?
Prime Minister.
This comes from the party that broke our criminal justice system, just like the fact they broke our economy and our NHS. They hollowed out local policing. We're restoring it. There'll be 3,000 new officers in spring of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The thug in the White House has shown that he doesn't listen to grovelling or sycophancy. He'll continue to harm British interests, no matter how compliant we are, and, like all bullies, he will always find the weakest link. Will the Prime Minister close ranks with our European allies and commit to retaliatory tariffs?
Well said. Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I've made our position clear. I've set out my principles. I'm not going to yield on those principles. But as I said on Monday, of course we need to protect our national interest, and we will always protect our national interest. But simply hurtling at the first opportunity into a trade war is going to hurt working people and businesses across the country. And that is why I'm working hard to make sure we do not get to that point, and I'll continue to act in the national interest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Prime Minister may be aware that my local authority in the East Riding of Yorkshire is the lowest funded per pupil for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and that his local authority in Camden is the highest, an inequality he has repeatedly pledged to end. Well, Mr. Speaker, the results are in. Next year, children in my local area will receive just under £1,000. Children in his local area will receive over £3,800. The gap is getting wider. So can the Prime Minister explain to the House why he thinks children in my constituency are worth so much less than the children in his?
We're applying their formula, the one that you put in place in government. We're changing it. Special educational needs is probably raised with me more than any other issue in this House. We're proposing reforms. The issue he's highlighted, the problem he's highlighted...
Order. Sorry, Prime Minister. Mr Alden, as Shadow Secretary of Transport, you'll begin the express train and it'll be out of here.
I think he may be making himself the next candidate for the Thursday defection, because it's oh, maybe it's someone else. Those that shout loudest end up over there. And I thank Reform are supporting our recycling moves, because soon they're going to be a party entirely made up of...
Order. Prime Minister. Mr Holden, I think you need to leave. No. Prime Minister. OK, Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Police officers in Greater Manchester are facing exceptional pressures as they work to keep our communities safe from horrific terror threats, hate crime, organised crime and regular mass large-scale protests. But despite this, GMP received the second lowest percentage funding increase of any police force under the provisional settlement, leaving it £12 million worse off. Now, I know the Prime Minister will share my concerns, so will he urgently work with the GM Mayor, Deputy, myself and Greater Manchester MPs to ensure that GMP has the funding it truly needs to keep our communities safe?
Here. Prime Minister.
Can I thank her and say I was humbled to visit Greater Manchester Police after the Heaton Park synagogue attack. The professionalism and bravery that they showed was remarkable. Mr Speaker, we've boosted total police funding, and Greater Manchester will receive up to £902 million, an increase of over £31 million. I want to reassure my honourable friend we'll continue to work with her and local leaders to make our streets safe.
Matthew.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituency of Melksham and Devizes does not have a minor injuries unit, leaving many to travel far afield to Bath or Swindon to access A&E services. Would the PM please meet with me to discuss the need for an expanded hospital provision in my constituency? Thank you.
Prime Minister.
Thank him for raising this on behalf of his constituents. I will make sure he gets the meeting with the relevant minister to talk through his particular concerns so that we can seek to address them.
Jasmine Qureshi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. After 14 years of Conservative austerity, councils are finally getting the support they need to deliver for residents. In my constituency of Bolton South and Walkden, under the leadership of Councillor Nick Peel in Bolton and Mayor Paul Dennett in Salford, increased funding is being turned into restoring frontline services, investment in town centres and support for families. Does the Prime Minister agree that the councils need serious leadership and long-term funding certainty to deliver, not short-term protest politics that put services at risk? And will he commit to continuing that support?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for a question. Labour's boosting funding for councils that were chronically underfunded by the party opposite. I pay tribute to Labour councils delivering results for her community in stark contrast to the division and chaos we've seen from Reform councils wherever they've been elected.
Katie Lamb.
Tens of
thousands of people across Kent and Sussex were without running water last week. While the response of South East Water was shambolic, the Staplehurst Emergency Help Team got a bottled water supplier, set up a collection station and delivered water to vulnerable people. Using only volunteers, they supported local people, businesses, farms and care homes with 20,000 bottles of water. Does the Prime Minister think, as I do, that South East Water should be ashamed to be schooled in crisis response by the volunteers of the Staplehurst Emergency Help Team?
Yes.
And has he, like many of my constituents and many of our colleagues, lost confidence in South East Water's Chief Executive?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank you for raising. The situation is completely unacceptable, and we welcome Ofbot's investigation into the company. That is the right thing. The Environment Secretary met company bosses last week to stress the need for accountability, and ministers are continuing to chair daily meetings. But it is totally unacceptable and it needs to be fixed.
Lee Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For too long, many of my constituents in Corby and East Northamptonshire have not had access to good, secure, well-paid jobs. We made a commitment in our manifesto that we would change that. You can't grow an economy based on insecure work, where from one week to the next, somebody doesn't know how many hours they're going to work or how much money they'll be paid. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that all workers should have the hours that they actually work reflected in their contracts so that we can give all working people the security to plan their finances, the security to plan their lives and the security to build a future for themselves and their family?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm proud of this Labour government delivering the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. And we're ending exploitative zero-hour contracts, ending unscrupulous fire and rehire practices, plus parental leave and sick pay. And workers will benefit from those rights in April, Mr. Speaker, and they should never forget that Reform and the Tories opposed every single one of them.
Robert Jenrick.
Mr. Speaker, one of the last meetings that I took as Shadow Justice Secretary was with the parents of Lenny Scott. Lenny Scott was an exceptionally brave prison officer. He uncovered corruption in his prison. He left the service, and years later he was hunted down and brutally murdered. Because he died after leaving active service, there was never any compensation paid to the children that he left behind. I know the Prime Minister would want to right this wrong. I wrote to the Justice Secretary privately after I discovered this, and I should say his parents never asked for any support. Would the Prime Minister correct this, ensure that this brave man's children have the support that they need as they grow up without the father that they deserved, and join me in thanking all the brave men and women who serve us in our prison service?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this, and I will make sure that it is looked into as a matter of urgency, given the circumstances he's set out.
Fred Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And there we will leave Prime Minister's questions for this week. We'll bring you anything of significance if it happens. Let's introduce my guests for this part of the programme. We're joined by Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, by Helen Waitley, Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, and, of course, our Chief Political Correspondent, Henry Zeffman. Let's have a look at some pictures of Donald Trump, who has just arrived in Switzerland. This is him getting off his plane. He originally had to turn back because there was a minor technical fault on the plane, but here he is arriving for that summit in Davos. And it's fair to say that there have been some growing tensions between the President and European leaders, the Canadian Prime Minister, over his words and actions, particularly to do with Greenland, and then the threat of tariffs coming on his allies. Henry, this, of course, came up during Prime Minister's questions, maybe not surprisingly. What did you make of what the Prime Minister had to say?
I mean, I think there's a parochial point to make and a geopolitical point to make, because it has been a big week of geopolitics. The parochial point is that Keir Starmer has had, and this is the view of lots of Labour MPs I speak to as well, quite a difficult few weeks at PMQs. Often Kemi Badenoch has bested him argumentatively. That, I think, was his strongest PMQs for some time. And from the sounds of the Labour MPs roaring with approval behind him. They very much thought so too. And that was not a given because he entered the chamber, I think, under some pressure, including from his own side, as we heard a little bit of from at least one MP, to take a harder stance on Donald Trump. And that brings me to the geopolitical point, because I think we will look back in weeks, months, maybe years to come as that being quite a moment, specifically where Keir Starmer, speaking about Donald Trump, with whom he has spent a year trying to cultivate, and at points successfully cultivating, a very warm rapport, he said, he wants me to yield and I'm not going to do so. Now, he was talking about Greenland, but I think that felt like a broader statement of how the Prime Minister sees the relationship with the US and where he wants to draw the line. And look, you can see we've been building up to this for a few days, not least with the tirade that Donald Trump unleashed on his Truth Social network yesterday morning. It was only yesterday morning, gosh, lots happened since then. But still, wow, what a moment in the relationship between the US and the UK, which I think we maybe still call special, but it doesn't feel like it right now.
Lisa, do you think he's left it too long to change his approach, Keir Starmer?
No, I don't. I think he's been acting in the national interest since we were elected. And he has made very clear the principles on which we pursue that relationship. We've had a very long and very deep relationship with the United States as a country for a very long time under successive governments on both sides of the Atlantic. Our security relationship, in particular with the United States, is absolutely second to none. It is the closest relationship in the world, and it has kept generations of people safe in this country. But when it comes to the most recent events and the question of Greenland and the future of Greenland, he has been absolutely crystal clear from the outset that the future of Greenland is a matter for the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark. That is what we're fighting over in Ukraine, the right of people to exert their own sovereignty over their own territory and not to be cowed by bullies who try to prevent us from doing so. At this moment, NATO has to stand together, has to come together and stand together. And that is why it's not only completely wrong to impose tariffs or threaten to impose tariffs on allies, but it is also completely wrong to start changing your mind about deals that have been done in our collective interest in the US and the UK in the Chagos Islands in order to secure our future and our security, in order to try to pressure or bully allies into a different position. I think the Prime Minister was absolutely right to say that while we will continue to have a close relationship with the United States and that relationship will endure, those principles are non-negotiable.
Do you think Trump's trying to bully us?
I think he is undoubtedly trying to put pressure on NATO allies to change their position on the future of Greenland. And as the Prime Minister said absolutely clearly at the dispatch box, we as a government will not yield. It is not in the interests of the British people. It's not in the interests of national security. It is not in the interests of the future of NATO, and we will not do it.
Is he a bully?
Well, look, I mean, these tactics are not something that you would expect from an ally. And whilst I don't want to ramp up the rhetoric and the war of words, because I don't think that serves the interests of my constituents in Wigan or anybody around this country, I think we have to be absolutely crystal clear that it is not acceptable to threaten your own allies with tariffs, to try and undermine deals that we have done as two governments working collectively in our national interests that help keep our people safe, in order to try to take a sovereign territory of another nation. That is a principle on which we will not yield. We will never yield. And I think the Prime Minister could not have been clearer about that.
Helen, do you think Donald Trump's trying to bully us?
Well, let's unpick this and the various issues that are at stake here. I mean, firstly, on Greenland, and Kemi Badenoch came straight out on Greenland and said that the future of Greenland should be decided by the people of Greenland.
Yeah, there's agreement across the parties.
And it was wrong for Trump to propose tariffs on the UK because of what he wants from Greenland. And Kemi was straight out on that. Keir Starmer has also followed through and said the same thing. And so there is a cross-party agreement on standing firm on Greenland. However, we need a Prime Minister who is strong on the world stage. And in fact, the world stage used to be Keir Starmer's happy place because the UK and the Parliament was a tough territory for him. But he has shown himself to be weak and wrong on Chagos. And that is undermining, will undermine our security as a country and undermines his status and our status on the world stage, because he's chosen to give away an important national security asset, and in fact paying UK taxpayers money, the cost of 35 billion.
I need Henry to explain this, because I think
is something that weakens us.
Okay, it's a complicated situation. Just give us a little bit of the background of what the Chagos deal is.
I'll do my best. The Chagos Islands, also known as the British Indian Ocean Territory, are the subject of a deal which hasn't yet quite been finalised between the UK and Mauritius. And under the deal, the UK gives sovereignty to Mauritius, but then it leases back the islands for 99 years. And the reason for that is that on the biggest island, Diego Garcia, there is a big US-UK, I think mostly US, base operating. And that's, by the way, why the US view on this deal matters. Now, back in May 2025, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, endorsed the deal, commended it pretty strongly. Clearly, the US government position has changed. We heard a bit from President Trump last night at the White House, expanding on the post that he'd done on social media earlier in the day about why he now opposes the deal. I mean, it's just worth saying the basis on which he seems to have changed his mind is just wrong, because he named two things. Firstly, he said the deal has changed since he endorsed it. That's just not right. And secondly, he said, well, the UK must be doing it for money. But actually, as Helen said, one of the most controversial features of the deal is that the UK is paying Mauritius, I think, about £100 million a year for 99 years as part of this deal.
Let's Scott Bessent. I just want to bring in, because we've had Scott Bessent, who was the US Treasury Secretary, has actually spoken about this. Just listen to what he has to say.
President Trump has made it clear that we will not outsource our national security or our hemispheric security to any other countries. Our partner, the UK, is letting us down with the base on Diego Garcia, which we had shared together for many, many years, and they want to turn it over to Mauritius.
Lisa, David Lammy said that if President Trump opposes the deal, it won't go ahead. They obviously now oppose it.
Well, look, President Trump agreed the deal. I mean, it wasn't just members of his administration who helped to negotiate the deal and welcomed it. It was President Trump himself. He said it was very strong, very powerful. They were in full support of the deal. And I just have to say, that just to explain why we've done this deal, because the future of that military base, which is absolutely central to the UK's defence capabilities and strategic interests and the United States, was under threat. It had been challenged in the courts, and this was a deal that was started under your government, Helen. So James Cleverly, no, sorry, let me say, because you've given your new position, but the truth is that this was a deal that James Cleverly, as Foreign Secretary, tried to negotiate, didn't manage to negotiate. No, sorry, it is true. And you have now changed your position. Why? Because of opportunism. I am horrified by what you just said. We are spending less than 0.2% of our defence budget, which, by the way, we are increasing in a way that your government never did on this military base. It's a deal that you initiated, that we managed to negotiate.
You keep saying things that are not
true. And let me just finally say this.
Then I'll give you your say.
Try and make something that's true this time.
It is absolutely right that your party leader took a clear and principled position on the future of Greenland. It's something that we welcomed because it is in the national interest, and you are absolutely right to do so. But you've just completely undermined any commitment to this country or any claim to be called patriots by siding with a US president who is trying to unravel that deal and unravel the future of NATO. Frankly, I don't know how you can go back to your constituency and look people in the face.
You have just said several things that were not true.
You did start the negotiations. That is true.
So, of course, there was conversation. However, this was not a deal
there were several
that we did
weren't there?
And that we were going to do and that James Cleverly was going to do when he was Foreign Secretary.
So what were you
this was a deal that the Labour government has done, and they've done it, I think, because it's Keir Starmer's human rights lawyer view on the world.
You would have ignored
the judgment. No, there was no need. Nobody was going to, because of that judgment, going to suddenly take the base away from us. That was not what would have played out.
What would have played out?
So the fact is,
what would have played out?
So we would not have done the deal that you guys have done.
You were trying to do the deal.
No, we were not. So that but just because there is a conversation going on, which is of course a completely normal thing to happen, does not mean we would have done the deal that you guys have done, which is giving that away.
People can remember
and
what happened 18 months ago.
Paying to give that away.
People's
that is not
memories
something
are
we
not
would have done.
that
It's not
short,
Kemi, and
Helen.
Kemi has been consistent in her position on
But Helen,
this.
Donald
and the
Trump
problem is
did agree
that
it.
weakens
He did
Keir Starmer
agree it,
in
didn't he?
Well, I'm glad to see now on this he's actually recognises that Kemi Badenoch, and what we've been saying all along, has been the right position. I mean, also on this, and it's one of my great
think that's
frustrations.
why he's changed his mind? You think because Kemi Badenoch has opposed it that he thinks he's changed his mind? Or do you think it's about
So you
Greenland?
talk as if you want to be strong on defence. Now, the fact is we do need to spend more money on defence in the world we live in. I'm in my position as Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, I look at one of the areas where the government should be making savings on government spending in order to be able to spend more on defence, on the benefits bill. But your party has proven completely unable to make any savings to the benefits bill as it gets bigger and bigger. Your backbenchers rejected any reforms that would have brought down, reduced at least the rise in the benefits bill. You need to do that so that more money can be spent on defence.
Can I respond to that? Because you know very well, or at least I hope you do, that the amount that we announced that we were spending on welfare was welfare to work. So it's getting people back to work that you had allowed to languish on benefits for a very long time. Wasted lives, wasted opportunity, and bad economics.
Lisa,
you know that is true. And can I say this as well? You said that we need to spend more on defence, but you opposed every single measure in the budget that raised money for defence, which means that we are now able to spend £5 billion extra this year alone.
Of course, you could oppose a budget. It was a disaster for the country. We're not going to back that budget.
You never did. You had 14 years in government. You didn't spend the amount on defence that we're spending now.
Donald Trump wants the NATO to spend 5%. I mean, we're nowhere near that, are we? Would your party spend 5%?
No, so we've committed that we want to see and that defence spending needs to go up to 3%.
Which is what we're doing.
You have to be realistic.
So none of this is anywhere near what Donald Trump
got no date for when you're going to hit that. Nor can I see any plans for by what date are you going to hit 3%?
So we're going to hit 3% in the next Parliament. You had 14 years. You didn't manage to do it. We've put £5 billion extra in this year. Defence spending is now at its highest level since we were last in government when I was a teenager. You just can't rewrite history. It's all very well to sit here and say now about all the things that you think this country should be doing, but you had 14 years to do them. You didn't do a single one.
Look, that is always what you go back to. And the fact is, you guys are in government now, and everything I hear from people people I talk to is how angry they are, how badly you are doing it, and how wrong Keir Starmer is getting it.
You haven't got a leg to stand on.
Before we move on to another subject, Henry, I just want to... Where do you think the government feels Keir Starmer is now in terms of he's not gone to Davos? Do you think that's the right decision, given the circumstances?
I can see why they will have decided it was too risky, because he had never been planning to go. So suppose he had gone after what President Trump posted yesterday and then not managed to secure a meeting with him. I think that probably would have made things worse and would have made him look weaker. And I can also see, by the way, given what he's now done in terms of strengthening his rhetorical position at PMQs, why they wanted that dispatch box moment, frankly, for the Prime Minister to communicate to the country what his position now is on President Trump. I mean, substantively, not a lot has necessarily changed, but tonally, it is a big shift just from Monday morning where he gave that speech in Downing Street.
OK, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about a proposed social media ban. There seems to be a growing sense of people getting behind this idea. The government has launched a consultation. This is a social media ban for the under-16s. That's the proposal there. That's going to be launched, has been launched now. But actually, more imminently than that, in the House of Lords this afternoon, peers are going to vote on all of this. And we are joined now by the independent crossbench peer, Baroness Kidron. Thank you for speaking to us today. Just explain to us what exactly it is that the votes will be on this afternoon in the House of Lords.
So there's been a growing call for a ban, and there is an amendment that would indeed ban social media for under-16s, and that's been around a long time. It's, as you said in your introduction, it's gathered a lot of force, including about 60 of Labour's own backbenchers at the other end, which is crucial because then if it passes through here, goes to the other place, it means that there's at least 60 people on the government benches who are not willing to just walk through and overturn it. So that's why it's become a huge thing. Now, in slightly late-breaking news, the Liberal Democrats this morning made an amendment to that amendment that takes a more risk-based approach rather than an outright ban. And so what you're going to see this afternoon is those people who are calling for a ban, talking for the ban, and those people who would like to see something different, talking for a risk-based approach. And in the middle of that, you have a hastily created consultation provided by the government, which they announced yesterday, which I'm absolutely furious about, because the consultation is not really on the main point of child safety. It's actually a bit of party management trying to deal with their own backbench revolt.
Well, look, stay with us, because I'm going to put that very point to the Culture Secretary who's sitting here, Lisa. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I have huge amounts of respect and time for Baroness Kidron and have worked together on some really thorny issues over the last year. But I can say to you this, that when Liz Kendall was appointed Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology back in September, this is literally the first conversation that I had with her about how we keep children safe online, about how we enable them to feel the benefits of technology without the harms that are very clearly happening. What we've announced as a consultation, I think, is the right thing to do. It's short and sharp. It's 3 months, which is the minimum statutory period that as a government you have to consult for, but not a day longer, because there are mixed views that have been put forward about how you tackle this. You just heard a little bit of that about the debate that's happening in the House of Lords. But for example, the NSPCC has come out against the ban. They say that it could push young people into more harmful parts, unregulated parts of the internet. They don't want to cut off the life-saving ability of young people to be able to use some of these forums to be able to get help. They do want us to take action, though. And I just want to say to anybody listening at home, because like them, I have a little boy and it keeps me awake at night thinking about some of the things that he's exposed to online. I do want to say that we are consulting on what we do, not whether we do something. We will tighten the law, we will introduce greater enforcement powers, and we will introduce other measures as well. And we're consulting on how we best go about that in order to take swift action to deal with what is a problem for every single family in this country.
Baroness Kidron, if I could just bring you back in there. I mean, Lisa and Andy, they're talking about the fact that actually there are some people who don't think this is the right way to go. One of those is Ian Russell, who, of course, you know, has done lots of campaigning after his daughter took her own life after seeing self-harm content online. What do you say to those who say that this is just, it's too blunt an instrument, if you like?
I'm going to say something rather controversial, which is today is an absolute day of shame for government and for Ofcom. And the reason is that a ban should not be necessary because we have an online safety bill. And I say to the Secretary of State, you know, we had a consultation on a white paper, on a green paper, we had pre-legislation scrutiny, we had scrutiny. We have had consultations on the 2 codes that came out. And the government, since it's been in power, has pushed back on all the amendments that we've put. Very, very expert people in this end of the House. They've pushed back on AI CSAM, they've pushed back on intimate image abuse, they've pushed back on AI chatbots, they've pushed back. This consultation is looking over its shoulder at a political welling up. And I agree with Ian Russell. He and I have worked together for years. You know, the Five Rights Foundation, which I actually founded, is also asking for more. But the problem is this, that if the government actually are going to do nothing except look over their shoulder and talk to the tech bros and keep America happy, we have to actually describe the moment of pain of parents up and down the country for the inertia. And I'm sorry, but you know, we are on our 2nd Secretary of State, but the government has been in for more than 15 months, and they promised in opposition to fix what was happening, and no fixes have
Baroness,
happened.
I just want to bring, I must let Lisa and Andy answer that, and then I want to bring in Henna. We're running out of time.
Can I just say that is categorically untrue, and I don't want any family in this country to go away and think that any of that was correct. What we're not going to do is introduce measures that could put children more at risk. What we are going to do is take action in a space where we need to see action. And we've already done it. Don't trust what I'm saying here. Trust what we've done. We've introduced the first ever guidance for screen time for under 5s. We stood up very quickly, immediately, to Elon Musk and to Grok and took swift action to force them to take down those obscene and appalling images and to prevent them from continuing along the path of harms. And we are pushing Ofcom and working with Ofcom to make sure that we enforce the laws that we already have. So I do not want anyone to think for one moment that a single word of that is true.
Helen, your party's in favour of a ban.
So Kemi Badenoch and the Shadow Secretary of State for Education, Laura Trott, have both been campaigning for action on this. And actually, I hear from Lisa that the government has announced a consultation. They are at least listening on that. Now, I'm a parent of teenagers. I'm right in the thick of this, of social media use, and I see what they enjoy about it and how they use it to connect with their friends. And I know, and they know about the risks that young people can be exposed to. I mean, I think the key here is, and as we have from Baroness Kidron, the time has come for government to act and do something about this, not just to let this roll on without doing anything.
OK, well, that is all happening in the House of Lords this afternoon. And Baroness Kidron, thank you very much for joining us. We've run out of time today, but we will have you back to talk about this once the votes have happened. So thank you very much. That is all for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more Politics Live at 12:15. That's, of course, here on BBC Two and iPlayer. Please do join me then. Thank you.